Hello, good morning. Hopefully we have people there, but even if we don't, good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're here. It is only 8:03. We've improved on last time, which was a bit later than this. But anyway, I am so excited to welcome Marti and Steve to the Shining a Light room. And I just asked Steve just before in the green room, are you ready to shine your light? And he said, absolutely. And words are important. So he's here to shine his light. And Marti has been up in the Arctic, near the Arctic Circle. And so she's going to be sharing her newly kind of infused light, I believe. But the conversation today is all around, I believe, the exploring ourselves. And we're going to delve into what the process and what it means to be, this is my understanding of it, exploring ourselves more. And what do we do and how does that look? And I'm just going to leave it to you guys and Marti, for you to kick off with your sort of understanding of what this topic is. And then Steve, you can jump in with all the awesome questions.
With my dumb questions, yeah.
Well, I was really going to say awesome.
Awesome questions. Yes, the words are important, right?
Yes. All right. Have fun. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Ev. All right. Well, actually, let me do what Av suggested and start off with a piece from Indigenous cultures, how humans used to live. That's what I believe about Indigenous cultures. We used to be that. It was extremely important in earlier human cultures that everyone know their own identity, and especially that meant knowing your own gift. What is your special contribution? What is your special talent? And children were taught to experience themselves, not in an isolated way like we do today, but in relationship with nature. So this task of discovering our essential nature is actually originally a human task. And until we know ourselves at a very, very deep level, it's very, very difficult to get connected to anything else. Because are you connecting via a mask? Are you connecting via somebody else's idea of who you should be? Or are you actually being yourself? So the ability to know yourself very deeply and allow your collective, your community to know you in the same ways, that's what actually was called invisibility, having nothing to hide, casting no shadow. And so the capacity to come forward in your full identity was considered critical to the health of the culture, to the health of your collective, your family, your village, and so on. And so we've got a world now where a lot of people are asking, who am I really? What am I doing here? What does all of this mean? And when I start training people, the first thing almost everyone says to me after a few training sessions is they'll say, wow, I feel like I've come home to myself. And so I think a lot of people are looking for coming home to self, this exploration of what self is. And what I'm saying today, what I'm starting with, Steve, is this very profound understanding that used to be part of being human, which is that the only way we find who we are is by connecting to the world around us and learning to hear how the world speaks us into being. And when we do go after our full identity, we find out how we're connected into the world. And you'll find this statement in different, put in slightly different ways in just about every culture. So our knowing ourselves is critical to ourselves and to our community, and the way we find out who we actually are is to ask nature around us.
So a couple of things have popped into my head. One is people need people.
Mm-hmm.
So we're tribal. The herd of wildebeest, the elephants, the ants, that they all congregate and have a particular way of dealing. So people need people. And so as we as a human race have evolved, how have the tribal, so the ancient wisdom people, how have they been able to prioritize the earth and the connection to the earth, and being able to connect with their human beings who, because of the human being's nature, the way that we are created and built, we've got this brain that is almost getting in the way of that connection between the earth and us. So, so does that make does the question make sense?
Yeah, I got it. In when we're in quote unquote full consciousness, it's not about priority, and it's really about membership. And humans used to live, this thing we're calling indigenous is when cultures were still cohesive. Humans used to live in direct relationship with nature. Let's take we'll take South America, where they speak of Pachamama and how Pachamama speaks us into being. There was no way to find out who you really are without connecting to the earth, because she is feeding you a special energy that ignites the uniqueness that you are. And that's how they'll speak about it. And so there is no brain getting in the way of anything. When you're born into membership and you're taught how to enhance your membership, and you allow that membership to remind you who you are, then you grow up in a very different way. And you don't have this challenge of individuating the way we do in the Western world. We individuate by separating, and then we have to compete for place. But imagine being born into a culture where you're born into membership and your uniqueness is honored, because the totality, your village, your culture needs you to be that unique piece. They're received into uniqueness, whereas we're kind of shot out of a cannon. Good luck. Hope your uniqueness finds you thrive. Yeah. So it's a very different thing from the beginning. We've ended up with this hierarchical sense because of the way we use awareness. And I've discussed this a little bit in almost all of our sessions, that we're mostly, if I can say this loosely, awake, using awareness in the part of our brain that is wired to work with hierarchies and linear movements and choices between A or B. But we need to be awake in the rest of our nervous system, where we actually are connected to the world, and we process information very differently there.
I don't know whether you know this answer. So it feels like the indigenous cultures of the world have got this flow about them that has enabled that connection to earth. When did it go not wrong, but when did it diverge from that particular way of being, that connection to the earth, to being something more of less consciousness? Is there a period? It's obviously not a moment in time, but is there a period where those paths separated?
Yeah, there is, and this is my take on it. But first, I want to just do a 180 on something that you just said. The flow that we see in indigenous cultures, it doesn't allow the connection to earth. It comes from their connection to earth. Yeah. So that loss of connection to earth is what we're seeking here. So my take on it is that if we go way back in human history, before anything like civilization developed, we were living as another species in all of nature, and we were living in relationship to nature, because that's the only thing you can do, right? You're nomadic. You have to hunt. You don't have a village yet, and so on. And in that state, in that long phase of human existence, we were actually developing our nervous systems. Our brains grew tremendously. The cerebral cortex was developed. All kinds of stuff happened. We were creating, I think they found some like early pieces of thread that were oh God, I wish I could remember the number, like a 900,000 years old. We were really starting to create, but we did all of that in relationship to nature. So my take on this is, as Western culture developed, as the Greek culture and the Roman culture developed, there was a bifurcation point. And this bifurcation point is just a term from what we call chaos theory. It's a form of mathematics. And it says that you can have a process, a momentum going along in one direction. And at some point that's not predictable, some of that momentum is going to turn and take a different direction. And so for humans, what happened was at some point, I believe it happened first in the Greek civilization, somebody said basically, enough of this nature stuff. What about what's inside me? And so we gradually withdrew awareness from nature and took it inside ourselves to figure out what the brain is, to explore what is this thing? How can I think? How is this possible? What is this awareness of myself that I have? And we went inside and we went inside and we went inside. And at the same time, we were learning to build sophisticated shelters and temples. And so we began to cover the earth with stones and stuff. And again, this isn't a weekend event, but over time, on a culture-wide basis, people learned to withdraw their awareness from nature and they went inside themselves. And what happens if you become that self-referential is the ego level of your brain trying to do its job grabs all of your awareness. The ego is designed to be the home of your personality. It's also designed to bond, because we can't live in isolation. The baby has to bond in order to grow up healthy. But if all your awareness is in that region of the brain, the ego just grabs it all. And all of our awareness ends up in this tiny portion of the brain, which has developed to take us from A to B to C. It's developed to choose between A and B. It's developed to work with hierarchies, what's most important, what's next most important. So imagine a culture eventually being built on those same terms, A or B, one political party or another. Hierarchies, I'm more powerful, so I'm over you, and so on and so on. And because this, if I just am talking about neurophysiology, because this happened at the ego level of human consciousness, it's also very tied into the autonomic nervous system, and especially the limbic fear circuit. So our whole nervous system gets attuned to awareness inside us. And we then kind of foster over attachment and over linearity and over, too much judgment, et cetera, et cetera. And now 2024 years later, here we are.
One of the things that struck me when you started talking was the village, it takes a village to raise a child. So that the children connected to earth, they go to the forest, they learn from the elders. There's that respect, all the rest of it that goes with that type of culture. Mm-hmm. At some point in time, and whether it's the size of the group or the individual themselves, and how do indigenous cultures deal with that sense of, I don't want to use the word vulnerability, but more openness, so there is a transparency in that relationship. You want to be a member of the society that you're in, right? And you want to be a contributing member to it, not just taking from it.
Right.
So how does an indigenous culture allow people to feel safe inside that culture?
Again, I'm going to use the South American cultures because I've seen this. I've experienced this directly more often than in other cultures. I've just spent more time there. It's a requirement that you allow yourself to be known. It's a requirement because at some point the village is going to need you. And if they don't know you to be a dependable person, if they don't know your skill, if they don't know where you're going to need help, And if you haven't stepped forward and said, yes, this is who I am, and I take responsibility to give you my gift, without this joint investment in one another, the whole society is at risk. And so the collective says, you've got to participate, otherwise you put everyone at risk. From the Western viewpoint, it's like, oh, if I open up, I'm at risk. We're so self-referential. We don't have any way of sensing the need of the collective to have us. And so there isn't any worry about, if I'm open, are they going to harm me? Because if I'm born into this wonderful indigenous kind of consciousness, my whole village is saying, we need you, we love you, be here, open up to us, because we got to make this relationship. It's for our well-being, for everyone's well-being. So from the get-go, it's a completely different thing. And here we are in Western culture, where everybody has grown up a little bit too much on the side of hyper-individuation and no elders and no real collectivity. And all of a sudden we're supposed to open up. Well, of course it's unnerving. Of course it's difficult. And we don't want to be naive about this. You know, there will be some places where we can begin to blossom full consciousness again, but there will be other places where we can't do it. And we don't want to waste our time worrying and complaining about that. We need to, wherever we can, blossom full consciousness and let that have its ripple effect.
So it's a couple of things that popped in again. It sort of felt counterintuitive. You know, there's a requirement for you to show up, right? Mm-hmm. So because if we don't know what your genius is, then we don't know at which time to call upon you, right? To be able to use that skill, that genius that you have. So in the reality, as you said, you know, let's not be naive about this. The reality that we have today, that business owners have, is that there's, whether they've created it themselves consciously or unconsciously, because they've just followed what's been, you know, advised or told, or how they were brought up, or, you know, whatever the circumstances are. So we now talk about psychological safety, you know, creating an environment where people feel safe, right? And it's sort of, to me, it feels like we shouldn't need to be speaking about psychological safety. It's almost like it's a human right to be kind to the people who are around you. But obviously, when the ego is causing you to think a particular way, it's going to prevent you from doing that.
Yeah.
So it felt like it was like, I feel the community, the indigenous community, is allowing me to shine. I feel worthy of that, but I don't yet know, you know, if I'm a 5-year-old, I don't yet know what I'm yet to contribute. So, you know, at some point in time, I'm going to be really good at cooking, or I'm going to be really good at hunting, or something like that. So over a period of time, that's allowed. So in the Western world, if we've got an environment where there is this constraint that we've put ourselves on, what are some of the things that we could introduce into the workplace or into running a business that would not make it scary, but move in a particular direction where we can be transparent and open and honest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Of course, it's different for us because we live in a different world. So let me start with something that the Yaquis in Central America say. They say that essentially nobody's doing anything to anybody. And what they're saying is, if you have such a thin skin that you feel your psychological safety is dependent on other people's behavior, you're really in trouble. And then they will roll that back to, okay, you as an individual, let's see if we can get you, quote unquote, grounded, i.e. connected to the earth, literally, and let's help you find out who you are in your own essence, so you're not dependent on other people's behavior to be okay. And I know people who are in a job, they're working for other people, and they're in jobs that are the atmosphere is extremely unhealthy, just because the people running the business haven't done their inner work. And I'm not trying to slam anybody, but it's really hard to find out how to do your own inner healing in a good way in this world. So there's a lot of unhealthy work environments. And I know one person in particular I'm thinking of is extremely talented and should be working on their own. Um, and the conversations we have are always about, oh, if only my workplace were better, if only it were healthier. Well, I'm bringing this up because for most people who are interested in how we're going to answer this big question, I have to say that most of the lack of health that you see around you will probably not be corrected in your lifetime. And even if it could be, the only answer is each and every one of us has to find a way to find out who we are. We have to go into ourselves to find out who we are. And as the Sufis say, if you go deep enough into yourself, you find the universe. And the elders in South America would add, you find your place in the universe. And it works the other way. If you go deep enough into the world around you, you find yourself. But no matter whether you're living in a healthy situation or working in a healthy situation or a not healthy one, you need to start with yourself. So you're right that this of psychological safety, it's sad that we think making something safe is the answer, because humans are unpredictable. You can't make them safe. None of us are that predictable. And what we've lost is this essential initial teaching of who we are as a member of the world around us. And that might not have a lot of meaning to a lot of our listeners, but if you think about a forest and you become a tree in a forest, the entire forest is helping you become tree. And not just the trees, but all the other organisms that help a forest exist are helping you become tree and receiving from you what you contribute. In the same way, as a human, we breathe in and we breathe out. If you're lucky enough to have trees around you, the trees are taking that carbon dioxide from you and gifting you oxygen in return. We actually are all woven in. Yep. And we in the modern world have very little opportunity to experience this. This is a really, really big question. And I love the depth of your questions. There are no easy answers. But what we're trying to do in a short bit of time is be like little lightning bolts into people's awareness to spark something. So this is, I'm so often, I end up saying to people, go out into nature. That actually is the answer. And people say, oh, yeah, right. Where's my strategy? I really want to challenge everybody again to spend some time in nature, not thinking, just sensing, just noticing color and wind and shape and temperature and texture, and don't think, don't name, no language in your head, and just see what happens to you.
It reminds me of, I've run leadership programs, and it's often the leadership programs where we do sort of outward bound type exercises. We take abseiling, we go off site. There's exercises that are in nature, right? Outside. The energy levels of the group is elevated. One, because there's this connectivity. They have to solve a problem together. You see how they can then become teams, and then we bring that back into the classroom or into the workshop and say, okay, well, what did you learn about yourself, and how can we now use those skills that you demonstrated outside into here, into this workplace that we've got. So it feels like there's this collective mindset that we are looking for. It reminds me of stuck with me is the business is an exchange of value. That you've said, it's not I'm taking or I'm giving. It's an exchange, and we could be dealing with, with pearls or with shells, but we just happen to be dealing with money.
Yeah.
So how does an individual let's take the question away just from the business owner, but if we're talking about this collective group, call it a business, how does an individual help themselves to show up into that workplace? So they've gone outside, they've connected with Mother Earth, they've been energized, they come back into the workplace, and they're back sitting at their desk typing away or on the phone or whatever it is that they're doing. How do they maintain that energy, or how do they spread that energy amongst the group and feel as though they're not being an evangelist?
Right.
Or should they be an evangelist?
Well, not in the way that we see most evangelists. Most evangelists try to explain the difference, and
Right.
at the level of explanation, there's no experience. So,
right.
This thing that you've just spoken about, the offsite events, where we get a group of people to do something different and do it differently. Yeah, the reason that starts to work is not that they're doing something different or differently, but we can get a small group of people in a radically different environment, so the environment actually starts to shift them. It's the environment that's grabbing their awareness and pulling it away from their ego structures. That's why they have those big experiences. But in the Western world, we focus on doing, and we don't know how to be aware of our state of being. So I did this thing and it was great. We were on a sailboat and we did this and we did this and it felt so great. And now I'm doing my office work. I don't know how to bring that doing into this doing. The answer to that, it has nothing to do with what you're doing. What people need to actually explore is the experience of those moments. And maybe you don't work for a big enough company that gets you in these offsite experiences, but if you spend a moment in nature, can you feel something bigger than you? Can you feel sunlight and imagine the sun for a moment and imagine all those photons coming into you? It's that big. Or feel the earth and how good it makes you feel, just a different energy pouring into you. The sun and the earth are still there when you're in your cubicle. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. Can you remember the feel of those larger powers pouring into you, because they're still pouring into you, and live at that level of experience and just be that? And your state of being is what's going to change your office space, whether you're a worker or owner or something else. It's your state of being and what your awareness goes to, what your awareness draws on, that makes the difference. And it really is simple. It really is simple. It's not complicated. I could talk for
Marty, when you yeah, we're heading it to the bottom of the hour, and the overlord's going to turn up any second now. But whilst you were talking then, and I imagined the sun and the going outside, and in my head I was outside, the sun on the skin and everything, and I had this feeling of calmness come onto me immediately.
Yep.
It's amazing that that the power of that whole it was, and to me it's then you keep talking about it's the experience and the feeling, not the thinking and the doing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's and then to try to most people will try to pop back into their heads and explain the experience they just had. Stop doing that. Whoever you are, stop doing that. Being able to call up the feeling of these big powers means that you are experiencing those big powers. This is real, and this is an example of what I mean about awareness at work. Don't think, be in your experience, and you can change yourself instantly. Yeah.
What an amazing conversation. And I love my new title as the Overlord. I said, I'm just being in the experience. I'm not judging. I'm just accepting me. What a beautiful conversation. So where would you like to go next for our next chat?
I had a bunch of notes.
Can I feel like we need to go back to some grounded. Like it's almost like, we've done the circle, and the circle looks like we're spinning when we come back to the point of origin. When in fact, if you turn the circle on its end, it's a spiral going up. So I don't know. I just had this sense that if we sort of went back to the beginning and we looked at the beginning and built back on the beginning again,
that's what
I don't know. That's what I felt. That's what I felt.
I felt exactly the same. Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know what that means, but it's sort of like maybe like a recap or a I don't know what that means yet, but that's what I feel. Because I'm not thinking, I'm feeling.
I love it. That's
okay. Well,
yeah.
We'll chat about that offline. We'll say goodbye here, but basically our next chat will be in a fortnight, and we look forward to seeing you then. And we'll share what that topic will be. But yeah, imagine it going back to maybe where we began, wherever that was. But maybe it'll be different.
It'll be different because it's an elevated version of where we
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see you then.
Great.
Bye.